as long as there's computers. So let me format my phone. All right. Yes, I want to record. Got it. Go to iPhone by iPad. Cable. All right, so what you're looking at now is my cell phone desktop. So I'm actually most likely going to paint this standing up. There we go. Let me position my tripod a little bit closer to the edge there. And I'm also going to move this in so you guys get a better visual. You can see that I mocked up this reference image. Let me show you the reference really quick. So this is something I did back in August. And you can see that there's, if you look at this, it looks like there's a lot to it, but we can break this down into two basic shapes. We have a big shape up here, a rectangle, which is our sky. And then we have sort of like a quasi rectangle down here, right? Which is our foreground. So the first things we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a lot of blue and we're going to be just doing a gradient from dark to light blue for our sky. And we're going to come around halfway down our page and we're just going to paint that in right on the canvas. And then what we're going to do is while that's drying, we're going to come in with some grays and some whites, and we're going to do our foreground here. And we're going to go from there. Start with the sky, jump to the foreground. And we're going to go back and forth for a little while. So I'll leave that up. Let me roll up my sleeves here. Now you'll notice a few things you're going to want to have. I have 4 brushes. I believe you guys should have around, you'll have more than 4. And what I would recommend is start with the largest brush first. Now I believe you each should have gotten a pack of like 5 or so brushes. Let me just put on the chat so I can see chats as they come in, as well as participants. And if anybody has any questions about this, feel free to let me know, right? I think last time we did like a Christmas tree, the last workshop we had, or last, yeah, paint night we had, yeah, it was like a Christmas tree. So you should have your paper plate palettes right here. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a little bit of blue and a little bit of white. And this one is actually, you can see that this is not been opened yet. And this one actually is the color I gave you guys. So I'm only going to use the colors that I supplied you guys. So I'll just keep that in mind. I'm going to squirt a little bit of blue and a little bit of white on there. And we have a little bit of white. Let me reach over. You can see this is really gunked up there. I've used this quite a bit. Put that over there. And I want to try to go along the outside of my palette. I don't want to use up too much room too quickly. You'll also notice I have a paper towel. You can see right out of the corner of your field of vision there, I have this paper towel. The way you want to work it is every time you load your brush, and you want to start with your largest brush first, your largest flat. So in this case, this is the largest brush I'm starting out with. One thing you want to do is we want to load our brush. We want to apply some paint to our canvas. And every time we apply paint to our canvas, before we continue, right, we want to clean our brush, dab it off the edge, and then dry it on the paper towel before we begin. Now, one thing you might want to do is just wet your brush before you load it and then dab it on the edge like this. So it's semi-wet, but not like sopping wet. Then what you can do is load your brush with a little bit of blue. And then just take a tiny bit of white to cut it. You can see how when I add that white to that blue, it makes it really light, right? And then what we want to do is we just want to go right in from the top. So I'm just going to go right in. And if it's drying on you, like if you can't get a lot of movement out of your paint, that's okay. Acrylic dries pretty quick. So one thing you can do is if it's drying really quick, just load your brush up with some more paint, more white, more blue, make more of this sky blue. And what I could do as well is before I apply it this time, maybe I want to wet it a little bit. So I get a little bit more mileage out of my brush. Sorry about that. Does anybody have any questions so far as I swivel my tripod back and forth? White will extend your paint a little bit. And you see how it's really drying up on me? I can just wet my brush a little bit, which I'm doing off screen. And then I can just apply my wet brush back onto my canvas and it just moves that paint around. Another thing I meant to mention, my camera just froze. That will occasionally happen, not a big deal. If my camera freezes, I'm just gonna click out of the frame and click back in. And that usually takes care of the issue. So not a big deal. See how that water just allows me to move the paint that's already on the canvas? The trick is you want to wet your brush a little bit. You don't want to wet your brush too much because that'll thin out the paint. And I can keep grabbing. This plate is going to dry. Now, another thing is I gave you guys one paper plate, right? So I'm going to try and make this paper plate last. But if you in your home have access to other paper plates, feel free to bring those out at any point during this little paint night that we're doing. And I really like this kind of sky blue that I'm getting. Nice. I just want to actually go from this side. I'm leaving this side kind of blank over here. I'm going to be going down a little bit further on this end, our right side, while leaving a little bit of room here.
Are you going down about halfway down the canvas?
Yes, that's a good question. About halfway down, a little bit more on this side maybe, but I'm actually going to stop it right there and just go up and just kind of play around with mushing this paint in, blend this a little bit. And then you see how I'm kind of like combing it's like combing hair. I'm coming in from the edge to get coverage up here. And again, if you're finding that you're fighting the brush, like you're not getting a lot of coverage, tiny bit of water on the brush and then apply it over the paint that's already on there as it's drying. Like if you see some wet paint that you're having trouble moving, and that'll help you just get that coverage. You can see when I put that wet brush on my palette, you can see how I'm able to move it, right? I'm able to move all that paint around. What I'm going to do while this is drying is I'm just going to clean my brush real quick. And I'll give it a minute just so everybody can kind of catch up. If there's anybody that needs time to get the sky in, just take your time. Don't rush, right? And if you have any questions, just speak up. Let me know if I'm moving a little too quickly. One thing we want to do now that we have the sky in like this, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to switch gears and we're going to draw in our snowbank down here. Then we're going to start up more towards the halfway point of our page, like halfway up our page or our canvas rather. And we're going to go down on a slight angle to the other side to get our snowbank.
Did you change brushes?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Just flat the whole time. So yeah, and you'll notice actually when I clean my brushes, what I like to do is I like to have a cool, like a well for my cool colors, like my blues and my purples, and a well for my warm colors, like my oranges and yellows and reds. In this case, we only have yellow for our warm colors, so it's not that big of a, it really doesn't really matter in this case, but typically if I'm painting, I like to have one for cools, one for reds, and then I'm always drying it real good to get that paint off. You see paint still coming off there. on my brush, right?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that that paint is coming off. And you can see actually, if we look at the reference here, these white areas in my reference, I actually added yellow to my white. And then for the shadows, I added blue to my white and blue to my gray. Now we don't have to go that crazy with it. We can just do a flat gray, right, for shadows. And we can do a lighter gray with a lot of white in it for the white areas, which is what we're going to do for our first pass here. We're going to make a really light gray, almost a white. And the way we do that is we make a teeny little bit of black and we add it to one of these 2 squirts of white I have here. So I'm actually going to grab a little bit of black, and I'm still going to be using my large flat brush that I've cleaned. So I'm going to put that down here. They have these amazing, by the way, because right now I'm using a tripod. Eventually what I'd like to do is get this really cool camera, this eye in the sky. They're just kind of pricey, but they sit right on your drafting table. And that would be really, really something, because I wouldn't have to reach around my tripod. So I'm reaching around my tripod right now.
Okay.
If you guys have any questions as I'm doing this, feel free to speak up. When you're mixing colors, if you're using a large brush like this, you can use the corner of the brush to grab a little bit of that color. So I could just come in with the corner, grab a little bit of that on the corner, make a separate well over here, take the opposite corner. So I see I have a black corner on my brush. I could take the opposite corner. Oh, let me click out, click back in. And then I can just mix it in and then mix both. Now that's still pretty dark.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is just, again, side of the brush that I haven't really used, keep mixing it in. This could be like my shadow color. This is like a neutral gray. What we want is a really light gray. So I'm actually going to clean my brush again.
I use a little bit more white. Yes, let's find some white. There we go.
And if you need to empty your water wells, I'm drying my brush throughout this process. Then you can go ahead, run to the sink, clean out your wells if you need to. I'll zoom in a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. Here we go. And what I'm going to do is I have a neutral gray here. And now I want a really light gray, like kind of like more like this. There's barely any gray in it, but it's just noticeable. If I get a little bit of this extra blue in it, it's not the end of the world. I actually wouldn't mind that, but don't think that you have to do that, right? You just want to do like a light gray and a middle gray for now. Now with this light gray, what we want to do is we want to come in.
Light gray.
And just kind of draw with the paint. I'm using the tip of my flat here to kind of go across, and I can mush it into my blue sky a little bit up here. Just like so, and I want to make it kind of jagged. I want to leave enough room. And let me move this over. There we go. So do this. I don't have, Bob Ross would use a really fancy old wooden palette. I don't have that. I just got my paper plate. So that's what I'm using. But he did a lot of these types of scenery. Like he's someone who really good on painter. And what I'm doing is just getting coverage right now. Just covering all that canvas, right? And you can see that even though it looks white on my palette, right? I mean, there's gray in it, but it looks fairly white, fairly light. It still shows up pretty starkly against that pure white of the canvas. I can go back in if I want and brighten some of areas up, but right now I want to get covered. So I'm actually going to grab a little bit more of my neutral gray and bring this into my light gray. I just took a little bit with my flat and just yanked it over. And then I'm yanking more white in too. And again, if I find that paint's drying up on me,
Yeah.
can add a little more white to it to extend the paint. The only thing with adding white to soften edges and keep your paint from drying is that it'll desaturate your paint. So sometimes you want to add white to extend your paint. Other times just a tiny bit of water will do the trick, but not too much water because then it'll thin your paint out.
Did he do the dark yet?
Does anybody like to landscape paint in the group? Does anybody has anybody ever done any landscape paintings before at length?
No.
I know some people have.
I have, Jim.
Yeah.
Actually, that's my favorite type of painting to do is landscape painting.
Yeah, they're really good. It's good. It's a good type of painting to learn on too. So this is actually drying up on me quite a bit. Now, the thing with acrylic, guys, that you want to remember is, see how my paint's still pooled here? It's still in globs. As long as your paint is in a glob on your palette, it won't dry that quick. But as soon as you flatten it and mush it out, right, it's going to start drying really quick. So I'm not concerned about my black, and I'm not that concerned about my blue, although my blue was drying considerably faster than my black because it's more spread out. The more of smushed in your paint is into one glob, the slower it'll dry. That's something I've kind of, because I paint a lot with oil, but the more I do acrylic, the more I'm like keying in on that. This is drying too, this neutral gray. So I'm actually just gonna try to take from here and mush that in just to give myself a little variation. And then I'm gonna wet my brush and just move that paint. Keep it really brush strokey. A lot of, let me click out and click back into frame there. A lot of times people who do acrylic paints too, they'll tend to paint a little thicker, which is fine. When I first started doing acrylics, I painted really thin because with oil, that's what you want to do. But I found I could never get my area covered quickly when I did that. So now when I do landscapes, I paint it a little bit thicker to begin with. And I really like that. So far, so good. I think what I want to do now is, while this is drying, what I would like us to do is clean our brush.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually going to go in and add some blue cuts to my sky, similar to what we have in our sample image here. You see how there's these cuts?
What you're adding?
Say again?
Would you say you're adding blue what to the sky?
Like cuts of color. Like you see how if we go to the reference image.
Oh, darker blue.
Yeah, like cuts being metaphorical more than anything, but like see how like these dark streaks, I'm going to add those into the top of the image there.
Gotcha.
And then after we do that, we're going to ping pong back down to our foreground here. And we're going to add in some blue gray shadows. We'll be mixing this type of a gray with a little blue in it to get some of those long shadows. And then at the very end, we're going to knock in some highlights along the top here. But what I want to do is have us just right now circle back to the sky. I'm going to grab some blue. And if you don't have, if you only have actually this flat blue, this because this doesn't have white in it, when I put it on here, and if I want to actually just start from the top, like right here, you see how that automatically makes like a cut into the sky. And you just want to go down at a slight angle, and you're using the flat of the brush.
Oh, the flat of the brush.
like, well, I mean, I should rephrase that, the top of the top of the brush. So I'm going in right down and using that top of the brush to move the paint. And I can rotate the flat to get more coverage this way, right? But as this shape, to get this sort of triangular shape, as I taper it down, I rotate it this way, right? From going this way to this way, and then just drag that tip. And that helps me. And then I can go over my edge too, just not pressing a lot to blend the edge. Just go over the edge a little bit, a few times, like combing hair as it's drying, because this is going to dry really quick on me, this blue. See how I'm like going over it? It's already drying.
Yeah.
It's pretty insane how quickly it dries.
Mhm.
And I think acrylic is something that they started using. Some of you may remember, if you were around in the 50s and 60s, that a lot of the ads at that time started using acrylic because it dried quickly and it was such a novel thing. It's like very much a 20th century invention, acrylic paints. And you see how rather than what I did in the references, I added stuff back in, cloud effects, but what we're doing here is we're working with what's already there. And I'm just simplifying it a little bit, but I'm getting a kind of a similar result. Just less thinking involved, really. And does anybody have any questions while I'm painting in this winter sky?
I don't know what exactly like this, but that's good.
I actually kind of like the sky kind of like that. I mean, we could take this further. We could add darker blues in, but I think for now, what we want to do is just leave it alone
Yeah.
and
when
give
you-
everybody time to kind of look at what we've got here. And if they have any questions, feel free to ask away, right? I know I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can kind of see how it's very brush strokey too. I'm not worried. I'm not really concerned with getting it super neat. I'm just kind of going in. If I want to cut in a little bit, I can keep combing hair. This is what I call combing hair, right? When you run the brush back and forth over your edges like this. Soften edges. I can keep going in as much as I want. I'm going to click out of the frame. Click back in. What I want to do now that that sky is kind of set, I have some blue on my brush. I've got plenty of residual blue here. I'm actually just going to take a little blue,
Let's have this- Oh, the dark blue.
mix it in with some white. Get like a sort of blue white. And then I'm going to take reserve another spot on my palette here. Take a little bit of black. Mix that in.
Mix it in the blue.
Yes. Yes. So what we're doing is I'm making 2 shades of like snow. I'm taking some gray and mixing some blue into my gray. So you want black and you want white to make the gray. Then I'm taking a little bit of blue and mixing that in. And then I'm taking some of that gray and then adding it back to the white that I already have over here. So blue and white, right? Then black and white, blue. And then I'm taking some of that and then mixing that color back in. So I have sort of like a gray, a light gray, and a dark gray.
The light gray and the dark gray.
And then what I can do now is take that darker gray before this really starts to dry. And I just want to mass in some shadows. So along the bottom here, if we look, there's like this sort of like hill shape that has a lot of shadow in it.
Mhm.
So what I want to do is just come in, and I'm not pressing hard, but what I'm doing is I'm just going in and drawing with the paint. I'm drawing in some shadow areas. And then I'm cutting it down towards this corner. I'm going to leave a little bit of room over here for some trees that are eventually going to go there. Now, if your paint is drying on you and you want to get a smoother application of it, at this point, I've got paint already on my canvas. What I can do is briefly wet it. I'm using my large flat. And then now that my large flat is semi-wet, not saturated, but it's got a little bit of water on it, I can go back over. And you see how that paint just moves now. And I can do that a couple times just to get coverage. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a few more shadows up here. I'm going to come in down from this side. Just like that. I want to reactivate this paint on my palette. I'm going to add a little water to this, like watercolor. And then I want to test it on the edge to see that it's not too saturated. And I want to continue sort of working in a zigzag fashion. Right? We want to have this V shape coming in from this way. And then I can take the flat of my brush and cut it to about there. And come up a little bit there. Now that I have my shadows sort of laid in, maybe I want to add some more, like maybe a mid-tone down here. So what I can do is I can clean my brush. And then I want to look at my colors here. So I have a light gray, I have a dark gray or a mid gray. Maybe I want to go back in and just lighten this gray up here, add some more white to here. And then add a tiny bit more blue to this, get it kind of quite blue looking, this light gray. So I'm adding a little bit of blue and white to my light gray. Just like that. And then I can go back over this light area and you see how when I do that, now all of a sudden I've got, and if I go really gently and I don't press down hard, I can even go over this gray as it's drying and sort of nicely blend it in. And I can use the front of my brush. Oh, let me click out, click back in to the frame. The camera wants to be temperamental tonight. See how I'm going one way and then I can rotate it to get more coverage the other way. And I want to try to use up all the paint on my flat as I'm doing this. So I'm rotating my flat as I paint. And I can even pop in over here on top of this area that I've already done. I can just kind of stipple in some thick paint on top of that shadow. And again, this is as, you know, say again? Question. Thought I heard a question there. And right now we've got the beginnings of a winter meadow or winter, yeah, like a meadow with no grass, I should say. I can come in and stipple with my flat over this area. You'll notice I'm using my flat brush quite a bit. I tend to really favor my flat brush for stuff like this. I'm just softening some of these edges by continuing to stipple over sections of them. What I want to do is just let that dry and clean my brush. Let that dry for a minute, and then let me see if anybody has any questions here while we're waiting for this to dry. We still have plenty of time. So feel free to speak up. If you got any questions over anything we've done so far? I'll zoom in so you can get a better look at what it looks like. See, it's still very brushstrokey. I'm not really going, not doing anything really too crazy there. I'm just kind of making use of these limited colors that we're playing with and just massing in my shadows. But when you pull out, it starts to tighten up. And that's the beauty of like a lot of landscapes. It's like they're meant to be looked at from like mid distance, right? So when you pull out, all those shapes like tighten up, right? Like if you even zoomed in on my reference here, this is fairly, like my reference is fairly brushstrokey when you zoom in really close, like really, really close. But when you zoom out, kind of comes together. So that's kind of what you're going for. I'll stop zooming in and out there.
I think I have a question.
Hmm?
I have a question. I didn't seem to leave enough white space on mine somehow. Is it
Oh, that's
okay
okay.
to take some white and go over it?
No, you're actually fine. So you're talking about right here, correct?
Yeah.
No worries. You're good. So the thing is, because the acrylic dries quickly, you're going to go over that anyway, right? I just kind of like, as I was doing it, I sort of like kind of made the decision to sort of like leave a little bit of a gap there just so I could save some of the paint. But like, it's not crucial. Like if you've gone over this and like brought your sky down to here's one band, that's fine.
Okay.
We're gonna lay in some slightly darker mountains in the background. So
Okay.
the main thing is what we want to do is get a decent amount of coverage and all that stuff. We're at 708 right now, so we're in a pretty good spot. What I'd like to do is, you know, I've given you guys a little bit of a chance to kind of just soak this in. So what I want to do at this point is make a little bit more gray. We're going to be making quite a bit of gray, blue gray, those kinds of colors because it is snowy. Snow colors, right? So what we want to do with mountains in particular is make use of our flat brush. And what I want to do is actually be aware of this rise right here, how far up it goes. And then I'm going to come up a little more to start my mountains. So what I want to do is take a little bit of black and I'll go to my canvas or my palette rather, my paper plate.
Yeah. Black.
Yep. And then I want to take a little bit of white and make like a gray, sort of again, like a neutral gray. And really your gray for this stage of the game only has to be darker than the gray we have up here, right? Because we want to make it a little cooler than our foreground, right? Warm colors come forward and we're going to have, this is actually going to be warmer when we're done, this foreground, and cool colors recede. So I could have even add a little bit more blue if I wanted to this gray as well. Just add some blue to that gray. Cool it off even more.
And you're always mixing with the brush, not that wooden thing you gave us.
Well, the wooden thing is, that's sort of, if you're unfamiliar with acrylic, right? If you're getting used to the medium and you want to keep your colors fairly consolidated, what I'll do is I'll use a palette knife, right? So, or even like a popsicle stick. But if you're pretty comfortable with the medium, like,
Okay.
then you can definitely mix with the brush. You just want to use different sections of the brush for mixing. Like you'll notice I use one corner to grab my black, one corner to grab my white, and then one side to maybe grab more white. So I'm rotating my brush as I mix different colors in to get the color I want. So I'm not just mushing it to, even when I just use my brush, I'm really not just mushing it together. That's where like the popsicle stick comes in handy, is if you're not used to working with the brush in that way, it can be helpful to have that palette knife there. For me though, I just kind of at this point. I'm pretty used to it. So what I'm actually doing is I'm drawing with that tip of the brush, the flat. I'm coming in and then I'm cutting right back down, cutting across, and I'm just doing a jagged mountain range. Series of triangles. Let me try and rotate that canvas so it's a little bit more direct facing.
It doesn't come thin.
And you can see that I'm actually going to paint into a lot of this. I'm going to cut down here. And we have distinct stages now. We have a background. We have a middle ground, which is this gray. And we have a foreground, right, which is up here. And we want to leave this strip of white kind of as is.
Look at it thin. You're doing the mountains all the way across, right?
And what I'm doing is I'm ad-libbing a little bit here. In the reference, we have an extra snowbank, but we're going to leave out that extra snowbank. What I'm doing is, again, for the mountains too, what you can do is you can use the flat of your brush. Let me zoom in. I can take that wide end of my brush, put it down, and then just drag. And then all of a sudden now I have a shadow. Right? I can do the same thing over here. And I can even do the same thing over here. Pretty cool, right? How you can just use the brush to create shapes. So I kind of like that so far. What I want to do is maybe take some of this gray that I have and dilute it down with even more like light blue, like maybe even go more like closer to that sky color over there. But not completely.
This stuff. The white and blue.
And I think we have some feedback.
Yeah, I don't know.
So just make sure that you guys, if you're not asking a question, just kindly make sure that you are on mute. That way we don't get any feedback, right? Just double check, because I know sometimes I do that too with Google Meet. I use Google Meet, and I really am not a big fan of Google Meet. I would recommend Zoom any day of the week over Google Meet. For those of you who use Zoom a lot, you're in good company. Zoom might seem like it's a little tricky, but trust me, it's way easier than Google Meet. In any event, what I'm going to do is actually go in with a light blue for these areas, like really light, like almost like white. So I'm going to grab a little bit more white, and then I'm going to add some yellow white to these areas down here. And then we'll move on to the next stage. So is everybody like excited for the holiday? I mean, I'm like, most everybody's kind of in the spirit, right? Everybody's getting ready to unwind for a couple of days, hopefully.
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 Yeah. I have a couple of days. We're going to my fiance's parents' place in New Hampshire, which will be nice. What I'm doing is this blue that's drying, I'm just trying to grab at some of it but I'm really keeping it very light, more like emphasis on that white. And even more so, just kind of going in. And I know I just froze again. It's freezing a lot tonight, so I do apologize about that. I do not know. It must be the time of the evening, maybe. I just got an Ethernet cable, so probably start using that more. Now with the mountains, one thing you can do is cut in with the side here like this. And this is something Bob Ross would do. If he would stipple in.
What?
See how, I'll zoom in. See that texture I got? What I did is I took the side of the brush, and I'll do it on this one. Bob Ross would do this. He would cut in. See how I'm getting that? You can use a palette knife for this too, although you can't use a popsicle stick for that. You don't have to do this. This is just like a nice little, you know, you can also stipple to get texture. I could bring this up. I want to flatten this brush out. See how my brush is kind of smushed here? What I'm going to do is just flatten it out on my paper towel, just so I have a nice flat edge to work with. And then I'm going to do that same thing where I'm just drawing in with the brush, dragging paint, kind of wet paint over wet paint. Although with acrylic, it's more like dragging semi-dry paint over semi-dry paint.
You still like making shadows by the mountains.
And then I'm just combing hair, basically, metaphorically, right? Just kind of going in and mushing paint around. I can even go over this again if I wanted to just cool this off. As the paint's drying on here, cool that off a little bit. I can go back over this gray as my paint's drying. I'm doing sort of like, as the paint's drying, I'm kind of doing what we call dry brush. It's a little bit, and again, this is a little bit more of an advanced thing you can do, but I figured it'd be cool for you guys to see a little bit of the dry brush. I don't mind some of the stippling that I'm getting in here, some of that canvas coming through, actually. I think that adds a little bit of texture to the mountains. One thing I want to do, though, is I want to, at this point, clean my brush again. And again, I simplified this a little. What we're going to do is, in the original, we had a snowbank here, which I kind of took out because I thought it was redundant, and it would just, we can kind of edit the image a little bit, right? What we're going to do is eventually is put a tiny green tree line in the background here. It's right along here. We're going to put a little tree line in there. Before we do that, though, what I want to do is come back down to the foreground and add some yellow in with some white. So that yellow that you've been looking at all evening, you haven't cracked open yet. You want to clean your brush real good, clean that flat. And maybe at this point, switch to a smaller flat.
Just took it up here. Right. Some more.
Something like that. A little bit easier to control. And then we're going to add some yellow and some white together, and a little bit of yellow, right?
Are you doing the next biggest brush or the one after that? I didn't see which one you grabbed.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So basically I had my large flat. I'm putting that down for now. I cleaned it nice and clean, right? Nice and pristine, ready to go when I need it again.
Yeah.
And then what I'm doing is taking my smaller flat now. Now you guys might have a brush that looks a little bit different. Like for instance, this is an angle, but for the sake of argument, assume that you're not using an angle, whatever you have in your kit. I don't think it's an angle. The next brush down should be just smaller flat, right? This is pretty much a flat. It has a slight angle on it, but it's for all intents and purposes the same brush you would be using, right? The angle only makes a difference when you're doing some texture things like what I was doing before, but we're not doing that now. So angle's kind of redundant, right? So you should get that small flat ready. And then what you're going to want to do is, let me go back to my palette here. I still got plenty of white. White doesn't dry that fast. just incidentally, if you keep it globbed up, or if that's also the thing, you want to keep your paint globbed up. That'll prevent it from drying. Glob that paint together. And I'm using these actually supplies that I'm using, believe it or not. I'm spoiled. I get these mailed to me for free.
Mhm.
From the company that I do online events with, a company based out of California. We do like a lot of corporate painting events and stuff. And
Mhm.
like they send us tons of acrylic stuff because we have to have whatever the people at Facebook or Amazon are using or whoever the event is for. So I get all these paints periodically every month, which is nice.
Mhm.
But believe it or not, every kit is so specific. That's why they mail it out. You would think that you could reuse a lot of kits, but you really can't, believe it or not. Like it's one of those weird things where it seems like every painting event is so specific. Oh, I just saw that. Let's pull back out, pull back in. There we go. Zoom back in. So you can see, actually, this is a good point for me to stop and show you my palette. So you can see how I'm dragging when I mix colors too with the brush. Again, it's whatever side has the least some sort of contamination, right? So I'll drag with my clean side this way, drag with the other side this way, and then turn it over, drag again with the yellow side, then drag with the white side. And I'm pretty much doing that to mix my color. And then just get that nice bright, because snow. And it might seem weird, why are we using yellow? Well, the reason we're using yellow is because yellow is an illuminant. And if you want to make something look like it's actually lit, then just add tons of yellow, add yellow to it, and it'll do the trick. So I've got a lot of like paint on my brush here. So I'm just gonna go in here where I have a little more room to smush it around and test it. And wow, look at that streak, right? Use the flat of my brush. And at this point, you can see how we can layer it, right? We can come in even from here, layer it a little bit. And I'm just going in, see how that yellow and the white punches it out. And then I could even go down here at this point, because we have some sled tracks we can attempt to render in there later on. And I kind of like that. I like the idea of like there's a tree casting like a shadow over here.
I'm outlining the white spots, I guess. I'm not sure.
And if I find that this is too bright, I can always go back in with some more gray and clean my brush. Actually, I'm going to clean it in my yellow well. And I can make a little more gray. Just knock this area back a little bit over here.
You gotta try to angle it so it gets a nice thin line.
I switched back to, actually, no, I'm still using my small flat. Just knock that back.
This is better for small lines.
And we're just drawing with the paint. That's what we're
And
doing
color
at
if
this
you want,
point.
it's the same color.
Well, whitish or yellow?
It's more whitish. It looks like this.
I'm starting to lose. I'm starting to dry up here in my palette. pretty dark. So I want to add a little more gray to this, a little more white. You see, like, looks a little more, makes a little more sense now. Kind of like that. What I can do is I can continue mixing some gray and then add a little more blue in there. My blue is almost all used up.
This blue's almost all used up. Oh, the stuff you put out there.
So I'm just going to grab a little more blue.
Straighten it out.
There we go. It's looking better.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to click out of frame. Back in. And I'll keep it zoomed out. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to create some streaks here. At this point, I can even switch it up if I wanted to. I could go to get some of the excess off my flat. I could go down to my large round now.
Large round. No, I think it's this one.
And just drag it in to get some of these more fine shadows, like fine effects.
Yeah, the blue thing.
I can add some more white to this blue gray that I have.
This is yours, the one that you were using before, like before I gave you the other one. I think that's the round. I don't know. With what color on the round one?
Looks like white.
And I'm just cutting in.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions, just feel free to speak up.
Oh yeah, that's all white.
White with a little black.
I kind of like that. I like it quite a bit. I'm thinking, I like the sky as is. I'm thinking at this point, what we want to do, we've done a good amount of work on the sky. We've done a good amount of work on the mountains. Next thing we want to do is come in and we want to get some trees in here. Now, how would we do that? So what we're going to do is actually, well, before we get the trees in here, let's get some sunlight over here, actually. I almost forgot to add the sun, right? So let me clean my brush. At this point, I've used both my large and small flat and my large round.
I don't think we have a lot.
I'll clean all those brushes.
Okay.
All right, so I've used these three thus far. I'm just going to clean all those brushes.
Just line it up. I like the color of the water.
And if you need to clean your water wells,
Yeah, hang on while we do that.
yep, you're going to find that that is a thing that will happen. So yeah, I'll hold up. You guys can do that. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some sun haze over here. And then after the sun's masked in, we'll do a little tree line down here. And then we'll start getting some some conifers in there, some pines.
Clean all the
Yeah, there's a
brushes.
snowbank in the original one. Like, I'll show you the difference. So like here, we have this snowbank that covers, and then we get to the trees here. I sort of just took the snowbank out. So we have this, and then we go right into the tree line from there. So, I mean, the snowbank does look kind of cool when you put that rim light on it, but it's sort of redundant. All right, everybody. So what I want to do is to get my green, we should have blue and yellow, right? So if we mix blue and yellow together, we get green. You want to do half blue and half yellow. So I'm going to take a little blue, take a little yellow, and because we want a dark green,
Maybe
we'll be adding a tiny smidge of black to this as well after we get the green color. I'm going to take a round to mix this in. So I'm going to go, I'll come up to the camera, take a little bit of yellow off to the side, and then come here. And you see how when I mush those together, I get a little bit of green.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to take a smidge of black. That's actually too much. I dashed some off. So you want to take just a smidge and see that's actually that's very overpowering. So it's black at this point with a bit of green in it. But that's okay because that tree line's pretty dark. So it's sort of like a very, very dark green. You could go lighter than what I have here. If you wanted to go more expressly green, like keep adding blue and yellow into this to bring it back into green, or just start another green over here. It's actually turning gray because this paint's not dry. So now that I have this kind of color, what I want to do is I actually want to come back up to my paint, click out, click back in. And I'm just going to zoom in a bit. And I'm just going to go in. And actually that's a little light, so I might want to go even darker. And I'm starting from here and I'm just dragging my brush up.
I'm not getting green.
You're putting too much paint.
I figured we could do the sun after this. It doesn't really matter the order, whether we do the sun or the tree line first. This area that I'm painting over right now is going to be covered by trees in the foreground,
Okay.
but we want to just get an even tree line in there.
Okay. That's it. Use it. Choking.
Where am I putting it?
The bottom of the mountains.
And I can go this way to sort of even it out.
Full grass. The tree line, but it's a little grass. Something like that on the bottom. You don't like that, but like that.
There we go. Take a little bit more of this color that I'm off panel. I'm loading my brush up with some more of that green.
Darker, but
Trying to randomize it. I know my hand is getting, I'll try not to have my hand get too far in the way here.
Mhm. Just want it across the whole mountain line.
You can see that tree line's just going all the way across, all the way up. Kind of like that. I think what I might want to do though is I might want to bring some mountains up here, just so I have it looks a little more natural, at least to my eye. So maybe what I want to do is make yet more gray with a bit of blue in it.
Where the mountain gray.
I know you guys will be sick of blue gray by the end of the night because we keep making blue gray, but it looks like snow, right? When you put these colors together, that yellow against that blue really looks nice. It looks a lot like snow. I actually like painting snowscapes almost more than I like painting real landscapes, like, because I think snow is it's so nice to paint. Like, I'm doing a piece right now. It's going to be like an Eskimo warrior with like riding a bunch of polar bears on a sled. And like, I'm doing like working out how I'm going to paint the snows, and there's a lot of purple you can do too. You can put a lot of purple in snow. And if you wanted to put the Aurora Borealis in the background, you could always do that too. Like there's a lot of things you could do with snowscapes that you can't do with like desert scenes or other types of scenes. Yeah, I needed a little bit of something there. Give it a pointy mountain. I thought about doing a painting with the Aurora Borealis, but I don't know, at the time, just didn't really, I mean, I was thinking about it, but I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. But I think the next sort of paint along I do, I'll do like the Aurora Borealis, I think. Let me click out, click back in. I know it froze in a good place, but it still froze. So I want to make sure that keep this camera moving. Here we go.
I'm not sure what, because I was mixing on this. See. Oh, it's got a little white inside. That's snow.
I'm just kind of cleaning this area up here a little bit. By cleaning it up, I mean I'm adding a light area, and then I'm going to go back in and add like a darker area. Bless you.
Thank you.
It's that time of the year, right?
I could use 8 times, maybe more.
I don't mind that. I mean, yeah, I could give it a starker shadow over here, but I like it. I generally really like it. Trying to give myself a light source. I like that. So my light source, such that it is, even though the sun's coming from over here, the light's coming from over here. So maybe it's backlit, right? Maybe the sun's over here somewhere. I don't know. it doesn't really have to make a heck of a lot of sense, right? It's just a matter of maybe there's a cloud creating a shadow. So what I'm going to do as far as lights go, I'm still going to put my light here, right? So
Oh, the sun.
that.
I missed that whole part.
Maybe we'll take a picture of it.
I could always go in at the end and add like a really crazy highlight to these mountains if I want. But let's get that light in there since we're at 41. So we want to get some yellow and some white. And I want to start with like a more of a flat yellow for the outer edges. So I'm going to fill in these gaps here. And then as we get towards the center, we're going to add more white into it and get like a nice bright bowl of light here. So I'm going to switch my water wells so that I have my sort of warm water well. There's like only yellow in this so far. And I want to go to my large round, but I want to clean it.
A large round. Oh, I think it says.
And I'm just going to add a bit more yellow to this. And if you're, I'm just kind of skipping around my, this paint's actually gunked up. Let me just use this paint.
I think I did it.
All right. And then I'm just going to go right in.
Okay. That's like nice and dark. Yeah.
I'm using my round. And I'm going in back and forth over those edges. And I still have a bit of gray on my brush. So what it's doing is it's actually mixing in at the edges a little bit. What I want to do is actually clean this brush. So in this part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my one brush for my yellow. And then I'm going to go in and do my small round. So I have a slightly smaller round I'm going to use for my light blue. And I'm going to be ping-ponging back and forth between yellow and light blue to blend this area. So obviously with light blue, you just want to take some white and add a very, very tiny bit of blue. And I'm using my light blue brush for this. This is my yellow brush here, but I'm using this light blue brush here for that. This part is probably one of the more sort of tricky bits, but you'll get a nice sky at the end of it.
And the thin one should have one little one that has yellow and white and one that has white with a touch of blue. Two different brushes.
Yep. We have a blue brush and a
Yep.
yellow brush. So basically I'm using one brush for my yellows that's round. I'm using the other round for my blues. So I'm actually going to come in and you see how that's nice light blue. It's almost white. And I can go in and I can cut back into my yellow a little bit up there.
What color?
The white with blue. I'm getting it in my yellow, unfortunately.
And I can add more blue as needed.
The white with a little.
Let me click out, click back in. I can even go back in and sort of space this out, create the illusion of sort of clouds. I add a little bit of water to my brush. And I'm just kind of mirroring my brush strokes that I put down before. I'm going to turn my painting this way so I get a little more leverage. And you can see I've added some water to that light blue brush to get kind of extend that paint out. And I'm kind of flipping my strokes up this way towards that top left portion. And then I can switch back to my yellow. And I can actually desaturate this yellow a bit if I want. Oop, almost dropped a whole bunch of paint on my lap. Let me put that over there for now. It's a balancing act.
Mhm. Some blue and yellow.
And you can see that that yellow really just, if you want to make something look like it's lit, I mean, I'm getting a little bit of gray in there, so I want to clean my brush real good, but generally it's looking like there's a bowl of light here. The exception is little flecks of gray that I want to take off of there.
I'm using the smaller brush. Because those lines are really big. Go in between so that I'm thinning them out a little bit. Yeah.
Bring this down.
Like thin it a little bit and then yeah, like that. Right.
I can add a little bit more flat yellow down here to create like a halo. Or better yet, I could just leave it and then go into a light blue, bring some of this light blue back over here. Clean my brush, in both of my brushes. So just to pivot, I've got my blue brush in the blue bin. You can see how that's all blue and this is more yellow. Just cleaning it. If we go back, now I'm going to take some of this blue and just bring it back into there. And then we get to the real cool part. We're going to stipple in some trees and add some more details to this. This will be really cool. So I want to take my blue brush. I'm going to leave that in my well for now. They actually tell you though, in art school, they tell you don't leave your brushes in here in your wells like this because the tips get damaged. But if you're doing it for like a little bit of time, if it's one sitting, you can leave it in there for a bit to soak. Although, let's take that out. I always got yelled at for not storing my brushes correctly. But it doesn't really.
Brother did it. That we're just not gonna-
It doesn't really matter, I guess. All right. Let's see. Let's take a little bit.
What color is that? Right?
Using white right now?
The very, very light blue. I'm actually going to add more blue to this because it's actually a little too white for my liking. Although I do like how that's kind of, looking.
Maybe come into it, maybe do a close up for a sec. on
Yeah.
What you just did, yeah.
Now with this, because I didn't think about light source, I put my shadows here. But
Yeah.
what I can do to get around that is I can just kind of like come in along the top here and add some highlights down each ridge,
Just a
right?
shot.
So while you're looking at that, if I wanted to get around that, I could totally come in. Let me click out, click back in so you can see. I'll zoom in again.
He's still doing the shadows in the mountains.
I'm just adding in a really stark like highlight to some of these mountains just to, because I was sort of just, when I put in the shadow, I was kind of just, I wasn't thinking too hard about that light source. That's okay though. I don't mind that. It looks pretty good. All right. Gives it a little bit more oomph going this way. Right. This mount we don't really care about too much over here. It's just, it's off in the distance. Could be set back, could be hidden by cloud, could be a cloud overhead blocking the sun there. But what I want to do now is just let this dry for a sec. And then what we're going to do in the last section of this is we're going to go in with some more dark green, and we're going to switch back to our large flat. I want to let this dry nice though, and I might actually just, while this is, I got a little water here, but that's okay. See if I can just take that up with my finger.
Oh, we need a other.
What I want to do is maybe just blend this a little bit. The wet, semi-wet brush, just kind of blend this in. Water is kind of your solvent in acrylic. It's what you would use as a blending agent.
I think he's just using water.
Why do I saw black here?
That's more like it. Leave that up, give it another few minutes. I'm going to clean all my brushes. And the next thing I'm going to do is take my large flat and I'm going to mix some dark green. Let me get up. And I will adjust my camera so that you can see exactly what I'm doing here.
Sorry, I missed it. Green,
Yes, we're going to be making some green. So I'm going to take some
blue.
blue and yellow,
Mhm.
make a little green. And then put a little black in there, and I'm gonna go, see, I only need to add a little bit and it gets like to a real forest green. And then what I'm gonna do is, starting over on this end, I'm gonna start stippling in some pine trees.
Where are you putting them?
Using this big one. What?
That's black or yellow?
So I'm actually gonna come in, start right here. And I'll zoom in so you can see better.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna go up.
Oh, we can make a tree.
And what I'm doing is I'm angling my flat and stippling, taking it on and off the canvas and rotating as I get towards the top. And notice how it's sitting right on top of my shadow there.
Ooh, yellow.
And I'm just putting that in as a placeholder for now. I can add some more darks to this in sections. So let me zoom out a little bit. Let me just adjust my tripod here.
Oh, I'm missing. Yeah. All yellow?
Mm. Let's do some of that, just to add a touch of black. to it.
It's quite the dark green that I have now.
Blue.
Yep, there we go. So I could actually come in now here, go a little bit lower.
It's losing me. It's too quick.
And the same thing, I'm making this tree a little bit bigger, a little bit darker too. And as I get towards the top, see how I'm rotating that brush. And I'm just gonna keep that in there as a placeholder for now. And if I want, I can add little bits of dark
Then
Yeah.
to this tree as well.
That's the whole trick.
Now I want to add some trees over here in the foreground. So I'm going to add two, 1, 2 right here.
just for now, make a triangle.
The bigger one.
And I'm just going to start
No, easy with the smaller one.
a little bit above this tree. At this point, my sky should be pretty dry. Come back down the other side and see how that yellow actually mixes with it a little bit. And then next thing I want to do is I actually want to come in. Just want to clean up these areas a little bit. Just get rid of all that white space. We're going to fill that up with snow anyway. Just get the excess off my brush. Next thing I want to do is I want to come in with a little bit of a darker, a really dark, almost black for this tree here. And it's going to be our tallest tree. And what I'm doing is actually, if you just, as this is drying, I'm just taking more yellow and dragging it into my like dark green. And then you see how dark that is. We want to kind of quickly pivot And it gives it the illusion that it's backlit. And we're going to go back in and add a little shadow under here after the fact. Comb hair.
You did trees better than me last time too.
Oh, let me click out, click back in. Sorry about that. No. So we've got our trees masked in. We've got our sky in there. We've got a lot going on. One last thing I might want to put in here is these are drying. I'm actually going to take some more of that dark color and I'm just going to draw in a few branches here. Let me move this so you can see that. And then as I come down, I can do one of these and once I add snow on top of this, white on top of these branches, they'll look way more branch-like. For now, I'm just kind of massing those in there. I rather like that. Next thing I want to do is add some more shadows to the snow here. So I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to add some, we're going to make some neutral gray, some of this gray here that we have, this like blue gray, but this neutral gray right here. We're going to make some of this. We're going to bring that into right below this, where the trees meet the snow here, give them a little bit of a shadow. And then what we're going to do is we're going to stipple in at that point, just like we did with their green, we're going to stipple on top with our flat, our snow shapes on top of our trees. And that will create the illusion of like a snow-filled tree. And you can refine it afterwards with the round brush. You can go in and noodle away at the shapes with the round brush. And we're going to do the same thing here with the round brush over here. We'll be coating this area with some of this gray as well. Although in this case, I might want to go in and bring the shadow a little bit further, this dark shadow in, so that when we throw the gray on there, it's going to stand out. So what I want to do is just grab some black, grab some white, and I'm doing that off panel. But let me go grab some blue. And I have plenty of cerulean blue here, which is the blue that you guys should have. Some of you may have different types of blue, bright blue, cerulean blue. In any event, you want to do blue and gray. And then white. I'm using my round to get that. It's going to test it. Nope, needs more. And acrylic is water-based, so really if you get a little bit of it on your hand, it's not going to kill you. Oil paint, you don't want to really get on your hands, that especially cadmium paints. I always use gloves when I'm oil painting. Let's see. can hold the paint up to the paint sometimes to color check it. Sometimes that helps you check your colors. Like if I blend this. I hold it up, looks pretty close now. All right, just give a little bit of a shadow under there. And then for here, what I want to do is go down a notch in value.
Branches that blow off the tree. It's just,
What I'm doing is just drawing in that last shadow there that we have.
we'll put branches and stuff inside.
And then I'm going to draw in some sled tracks here. Going to go with some light, almost white. Let me click out, click back in. You can see when I drag that over my dark area, I get these really nice sled tracks.
Mhm. So that's gross.
And I can keep ping-ponging back between light and dark. I could go in and add some really, really dark, almost blue blacks. That's actually pretty dark. Let me see if I can lighten that up a bit. It looks good from far away though. I like that. I like those sled tracks so far. Pretty good sled tracks. Clean my brush off. I clean it off real good. And now I'm just going to go in with some neutral blue gray. Maybe a little bit more on the white side, just enough to simulate snow. I'll leave a little bit of that dark branch coming through. And the trick is you want that white to be white enough to pop off the dark background. And I could come in actually with my small flat if I wanted to after the fact and just sort of blend these edges in. And maybe just hit it with a little bit more white. Stipple some white in there. All right, I like that. Now let's get into these trees. I'm gonna go back to my large flats, clean it. Want to make sure it's really clean. I'm going to take some white, cut it with a little bit of gray, and I'm going to go in. I'm going to go right in. So I'm actually going to start with these trees over here. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm just going to come in and stagger it. So like every other branch, I'm coming in.
This white? White and black. Make the gray again. Oh, it's supposed to be
You want to try and keep your snow shapes random. And then you can use the front of the brush to stipple in like a snow texture. And as it's drying, you can do the same thing over here. Like I'm using that front of the brush to kind of come in and just go back up and down, back and forth. And I'm just rotating the brush, like catty cornering it as I go up the tree. Trying to follow my original brush strokes.
Looks like icicles.
And we're making a little snow globe scene, guys. Let me click out, click back in. And then we got 2 more trees to do here. And then we're just adding in details. Now, this tree is in front of this tree, so I want to be mindful of that as I'm going up. I want to leave a little bit of this area kind of darker, but then again, that rim light from the sun's hitting it, so. We have a little bit of an area down here that's dark. Then I'm just going to go in here and do the same thing. I maybe want to come up a little bit, start a little bit higher.
No, I'll do the whole thing. Oh, but don't go all the way yet. So that they can see.
And then if you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in. You'll notice that as I go around the tree, I'm rotating my brush when I'm stippling, trying to create random shapes and edges and brush strokes. And I'm also dragging down a little bit as I go in. The trick is you want to leave a little bit of that green showing through to give the illusion that there's like branches and stuff going on. There's layers. And as you get down here, you want to really try to think about layers. It's looking pretty good so far, I think. And then I want to clean my brush. And then I can go in now with my small flat and just do details. I can go in and sort of like where the sun's hitting, I can go in with a lighter white and some yellow, or even like just like a lighter gray with some yellow in it. Look over here. I can just kind of stipple in.
What color is that? Is that in black?
Yellow and light gray.
And I can do the same thing over here.
Yellow. Nobody's put shadow in.
And I'm just going in and sort of layering, just layering my colors. Like this light, this yellow, white, it's good for snow, for highlights and stuff. I want to do the same thing over here. I might want to come in a little bit along this edge here. And then this is going to be pretty backlit. So I'm not going to have this edge and this edge. I'm going to highlight a little bit, but these trees are going to be a little darker. Oh, sorry about that. We had a camera tip difficulty there for a minute. I don't mind that, although I think I brought this highlight down a little too far, but that's just me being a perfectionist. So what I'm going to do is just go in with a little gray, just fix that. That's better. And then I can go in here and just add a little turn light there. Well,
See, he's got a good bit of snow around. I'm missing.
and I only want to get that rim light because that's you know the sun side, right? So I just want to get a little bit of it, not go crazy. There we go. Look at that. And again, from far away, it's going to look more referential. From up close, it's going to look more brushstrokey. So just keep that in mind. I could add a tree over here. Maybe I want to do that. And I could also go into the sky again if I want with some dark hits up here, but I think I'm going to leave the sky. I really like the sky as is. I think what I want to do though is definitely maybe add a little bit of a tree over here. So I'm just going to do some more dark green. And I'm just going to stipple this tree and it's like more like a bush. Clean my brush. And then add a little snow, right? So maybe a little more gray. The trick with snow is you want to add gray or blue to it or yellow to the highlighted snow, right? To make it look like it's really, you know, coming out like snow. And I'm just going to stipple in. I'm not going to drag my brush because it's still wet. I really like that so far. So good. And I'll leave you guys to finish up your paintings. We have a few minutes left. So I'm just going to leave that up for a minute. And does anybody have any questions about this painting? Any questions whatsoever? We could, you know, what you could do is we could give this a little bit more. We could go back and add some green back into this one, for example. Let me click out.
Your tree is better. What did you say? You're frozen. No, you're completely frozen. He's frozen in time.
But why not? I see me moving.
Yeah. Let me get a little more white into the snow on the top of the mountain. You got white, you got enough.
Hopefully he'll come back in.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going with mine. That looks like it's
Hey, everybody.
done. You're back.
Came back.
Sorry about that. I got it dropped me for a minute there. But let me just go back to my share screen. Oh,
I'll
Jill,
do
would
it.
you mind,
Yep.
make me the host again for two. There we go. We got a few minutes left. And I'll just go back to share screen. It's not letting me share screen for whatever reason.
Oh, let me try it back. Wait, where are you? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, no, that's funny.
There
There's a
you go.
lot
You,
of.
you should be able to share. I just made you co-host again. I think it popped you out.
Oh, okay, yeah. There we go. Yeah, no, there's a lot of wind by me. Maybe that's what happened.
That looks like snow on one thing.
There we go. And we're back.
That's quiet.
So yeah, what I was saying is this tree over here, before I got disconnected, you could go back in and see there's a lot of white here. You could break up some of the white space on this tree if you wanted to. So you can go in with some more dark greens if you wanted to.
Mhm.
And then I know we got a couple minutes left. So at the top of the hour, we'll take a quick break and maybe you guys could, if you want, show us what y'all have been working on. We'll take a little group photo.
I would love that.
Yeah, so that we can
She did well.
remember this and you can tell your family over the holiday, look what I did.
Mhm. How do we make them gray? White, black and white.
So you want to space out how much white area you have there. All right, I'll leave mine. Clean my brush. I think I'm gonna call it a day on this one. I'm happy with it though. I think we did a fine job on these. Really excited to see how everybody's paintings turned out. All right, so it is 8:30. So what I'm going to do is just stop the share. And then maybe we could go to view gallery. There we go. And let's see, guys. Let's hold them up, right? Awesome. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Oh, look at that. I love it. Look at that sky. Awesome. Very cool. Very pretty. I love it, guys. You guys did fine. A fantastic job.
Oh,
Can you
nice.
see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. there you
Very
go.
cool. Let's take, all right, hold them up. I'm going to
Hold
take
them up. I'll take a
screenshot.
picture.
Yeah.
We're both.
Oh,
on
look at
there.
that. Oh, there you go. Nice. Excellent. All right. And here we go. Boom. Awesome. Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. You guys did a great job.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you.
Hope you all enjoyed it. You're great, James. Thank
Yeah,
you.
See you again. Thank you.
Have a good
All right.
holiday.
Thanks, Jim. It was
Happy
awesome.
holidays.
Love it. Bye.
Good
All right.
holiday.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
I have that group.